opponents won't even try this approach. First, they won't even think about this, right? Like I said, nowadays it is considered like a deadly sin for many players to do something that is way out of line compared to the solvers. And I think this art got lost with the solvers a lot. And there are like plenty of these spots out there. Nowadays, it still works, we just need to find them. And the good thing is, we always get an edge when we do something better than our opponent. So I think this concept here has a lot of potential. Hey, what's up everyone? Beldaron here for TBP, and today we are going to focus on rack battling, but we are not really focusing on the GTO side of things, but more on the exploitative part. So basically, where can we check call even wider than GTO, and what kind of board structures and what kind of situations and against what type of opponents we want to check raise a little bit wider overall. So yeah, this is basically rack exploit theory, theory part. And yeah, let's hop straight into it because it will be a bigger one. Here we go. So we will take a look at the big blind position, and I picked a flop. It's a king 9-3. It's a limp pot, and we check. This is our opponent's c-betting range. I actually shouldn't c-bet so much on this kind of flop structure. So in reality, I think people c-bet way more. But let's keep it like that. So we just take a look at the overall strategy, right? So our opponent is betting 1 BB, and this is the range we should check call or check raise. And this is what you will actually see from a lot of regulars. They will do something like this, not 100%, so they will probably use the correct combos, but they might be pretty off with the frequencies just because they have different ISO ranges, right? So they might not ISO so much with these, they might check like ISO more of these hands, so they might have different ranges pre-flop. So even though they call the correct hands, they might not have them at 100% frequency or at 50% frequency or something, right? So when these frequencies are off, this has an impact of this will have an impact on these stats here as well, right? Okay, good. So what kind of hands do we call and do we raise? So as a threshold for raising, we basically use top pairs plus, right? So this is quite typical solver response. So we raise the best top pairs. This is what did I do? Oh. Yeah. So basically, the best king axis and the worst ones we are mainly calling. Second pair is mainly a call, and then a third pair you also see a couple of raises, and these raises are kind of mix like between like these are more or less bluffs, right? So you get a little bit of value from worse hands that are calling, but these are like they protect a lot to fold out some like relatively high equity hands, etc. And yeah, so a couple of 3x's like bottom pairs are usually in the check raising range. And yeah, so for bluffs, we the worst hands that we are calling are one card backdoor flush draw. So with these hands, so for example, queen high, we really on these kind of flop structures, we really need to pay attention to the suits that we have. So we need basically a heart to continue, and most of the time we need the high card heart, right? So the queen of hearts, if we have that, we call on the flop. And for the jack axis, yeah, so the worst kickers we are folding even with the jack of hearts. And yeah, a hand like queen 8 is also a call with the 8 of hearts, right? So the better the hand is getting, and the more backdoor draws we have, and the more showdown value we have, the more we are also calling with the 8 of hearts. But other than that, we are not really calling too much that doesn't have a heart in it. Yeah, like I mean, a couple of gut shots. Yeah, these are all gut shots. So yeah, jack 8. You see jack 8 without a heart is just a simple fold. And then for the backdoor flush draws, it is yeah, like 10-6 and 10-5 already is break even, and 10-4 is a clear fold as with a backdoor flush draw. And for the queen highs, yeah, so we are calling a queen high with a backdoor flush draw and jack highs with a backdoor flush draw. And that's basically it. And then our strongest 10 highs, but only the ones that have a backdoor straight draw as well, right? So 6 and 10 together with a 9. Every 8 is giving us a gut shot. Every jack is giving us a gut shot. So we have a couple. No, every jack is not giving us, but every 7 and every 8 is giving us a gut shot, right? So yeah, we have a little bit of additional equity. So these hands are calls. I think this is pretty standard. If you have a little bit of experience with solvers and how to play a flop, this shouldn't be unfamiliar. This is nothing special, right? But a hand, for example, like 8-6, even with the 8 of hearts, is a fold. However, let's keep in mind that actually it's pretty close, right? So even GTO wise, we are losing only 0.03 BB here, and then for a couple of other hands, especially back to straight draws, it's kind of the same, right? Back to flush draws here, you see DV of a call is minus 0.06. So we are losing like 6 B on 100 when calling 7-4 or raising. It has kind of the same EV. Raising is even better than calling. So these hands are pretty damn close, but they are still folds. I want to go directly into the population stats. The most important stats that I look at is the second barrel frequency, fold versus probe river, fold versus check raise as well. You see, actually regulars are quite aggressive. They c-bet more on the flop than they should. Turn is 50%, so this is pretty decent, pretty decently wide, and then on the river also 55% river bet. So it's like kind of aggressive, right? But what you also see is that the fold with check raise is pretty high, and the fold with river probe is insanely high. But as always, be very, very careful with the overall stats, because these stats are just the average, right? But it will be super rarely that someone really has these kind of stats. Usually you have some players who are very aggressive on the turn. So they might have a flop c-bet of like 75%, and then they bet like 70% again on the turn, so super aggressive. And then you have players who have a super low turn aggression. They have maybe something around like 32. And what actually I think every single player in the world has is a very high fold with probe river. I've never seen anyone who doesn't overfold on the river with probes in comparison to GTO. Basically, nobody is balanced enough to get to the river after he's checkbacking the turn with a good enough range and strong enough range to call the river correctly. These three stats are the main stats that I look at to make a decision if I should check call or check raise the flop. We saw that we should call these kind of hands, right? So these kind of hands are calls or raises. And as soon as someone has a low second barrel, we can go wider with the calls. This is the logic, right? But there's one problem, that we don't really know how wide we can go. And there's not really a way, at least I don't really know a way, to find that out. And why is it so? So there's one pretty, like usually if we want to know something like that, we would pull up the solver, make a note log, right? For example, we know someone is check raising wider. How should I adapt? What kind of hands should I maybe call, fold, rejam, or something? We put it in, we note log, voila, we have the solution. The problem here is that we want to make a flop exploit because of turn and river tendencies of our opponents. However, streets like the turn and the flop and the turn and the river, etc., they don't talk with each other when you use the AI in GTO Wizard, right? So this is one restriction. In PioSolver, I actually don't know if you can do it, because you would need to lock every single turn and every single river, note log, and then I don't know if the flop would actually change the flop play. But this is like a lot of work. I don't know if anyone has ever done that. I think at some point, or actually I know that GTO Wizard is working on that. At some point, you will be able to give the AI tendencies. You will be able to give them tendency of second barrel with a lower with lower aggression, right? So instead of like 45 or 50% second barrel, he should be a little bit too value heavy, not with less bluffs, so more straightforward, etc. When you have these kind of tendencies, then you can see how the flop reactions would be. But this is not possible. This is just simply not possible. And therefore, we just need to go with old school logic, right? So this is the only thing that we can do. And so what I like to do is just take a look at the EVs and pick the hands that are kind of break even and fill them up, right? So here, for example, if I have a hand like, if I have a hand like Jack 6 and I see something like this, there's just no way that I'm Jack sometimes folding, sometimes calling. I think I would just call these at 100% frequency, right? And then there's a hand like this with a Jack 6 with a 6 of hearts. You see here that the hand is barely minus EV only, right? However, I mean, we can actually take a look how much our opponent should barrel. So let's say there's, I don't know, Jack of spades. This should be a high second barrel frequency. So we check, we can take a look at the turn reports. Actually, yeah, you saw it already, a very high second barrel frequency. So we should bet in 44% of the time. So the Jack of spades is one of the highest bets with like 45%. So when we take a look at the strategy, 45% bets and like like 3 VB into 4. So just a 3/4 pot second barrel, and then having a couple of like pure bluffs in it, etc. Right? So some people will be looser than that. Question is, how should we adapt on a flop already, right? That's already a good question. And these kind of things we actually need to think about. And solver won't help you here, right? So if you are a solver boy, then you should definitely also try to implement some old school poker logic into it, just the thought process, right? Just an example. I'm just thinking out loud now. When someone is second barreling and third barreling way looser, might be a couple of counter exploits, right? So first might be just call like GTO-ish on the flop and then just raise looser on the turn, because he will probably have too many bluffs, right? Second adaptation would be to directly fold more on the flop, right? So we fold more, and then we have very strong ranges that can defend the pressure on turns and rivers. So yeah, we are overfolding a little bit, but then we will probably make it up on turns and rivers. Another option might be, depending on our opponent's tendency of his fold with check raise, we might check raise way more hands instead of check calling. So all the hands that are indifferent, we put into check raise, and we have a way higher check raise frequency against these type of players. But yeah, like a lot of counter exploits possible there as well from our opponent. So we kind of need to be careful, but this is how you should just apply the logic, right? So because it's like, how is it, scissors papers, this rock scissor paper, right? So very often like our opponent is doing something and then there's a counter exploit, but our counter exploits are always heavily exploitable from our opponent as well, right? If it's not, then it would be GTO. So yes, so you always need to be a little bit of a step ahead. Yeah, so basically we know how much our opponent should second barrel, and then if someone is pretty much like off in one of the one or the other direction, we can make exploits, right? And well, let's say someone is second barreling with a lower frequency, so he has like a 35 or maybe 40% second barrel frequency here. Then what I would actually add are first like these hands, right? So the very marginal ones, like the like these ones. So these ones, and then like backdoor flush draws, like maybe the 8-5 suited, or the 10-5 suited, right? You see, like these are like all break-even-ish calls anyways, and then we can just call these more like a little bit looser, and then also put like a lot of these check raises simply into the check call. I mean, or maybe still mixing it up depending on our opponent's range. If he still has a high check raise, a fold to check raise, we should probably mix it up. However, the check call with the plan to bluff the river is usually cheaper. It's a little bit cheaper, right? Because you check raise a flop, and then if you hit a draw, then you going to bet again on a turn, then you might end up three barreling after check raising, etc. Right? However, if you just check call, you invest one big blind. If he's second barreling, you just fold. And if he is checking back, then you have a very profitable bluffing situation on the river, and you don't really often you don't even need to bet very big, right? So you just try to represent something, and then sometimes a 1BB bet might be the best representation of what you can value bet on the river. Maybe just a bottom pair or like a mid pair, etc. So yeah, it is way cheaper usually to just check call, which is nice. So we have, I would say, almost the same fold equity, and way lower risk, because we invest less money, and in way better situations, like way more favorable situations, with less guessing, with more very clear overfolding spots from our opponents. Okay, so these are the hands that I would practically add. Yeah, I mean, question, like, is like Queen 7 a call or not? I have no clue. And yeah, if you have an idea how to find this out, then let me know. Against some players, I actually do, like, I just don't fold flop because it's like so good. But then, like, if you're going too heavy out of line, right? So let's say you're calling like a 6 deuce no heart or something here on the flop, then I mean, people might go crazy with the over adaptations, but actually I don't think so. Like, I've never seen anyone like going like super heavy out of line, like at least not nits, right? So they're nits for a reason, and then like they usually don't adapt too much, because it's just too much out of their comfort zone. I think it's like a little bit of a mindset thing why people do, like are as they are. Okay. If you liked the video and you want to dig even deeper into the topic, we made a video course out of that. So I went through real opponents' hearts and show exactly how and when to exploit them. In addition to that, I also went through plenty of hand histories where I showed exactly when and how I call way looser on the flop. And I drop you a 10% discount code in the description. See you. Bye bye.